I remember my death. The cat ate her dirty food. The sun shrilled like a rooster. My son went out by apricot cake, thinking of death. I remember a poem by Joe Brenard, in which he remembered his mother cried while eating apricot pie. My son left me alone just for a quarter of an hour or so, my eyes wide open because I wanted to see the emptiness.
I remember spaghetti puttanesca, linoleum floor desanitized, a newborn cry wheeling on the air as I walk out to meet the driver, a vending machine cracked light buzzing through a hallway.
I remember the fall springs at the end of February. The student of architecture always ended our love affair then. I think the buildings around us were still too grey and old, missing the sparkling icy light, though I like the word February.
I remember how the calendar was made cheaply, the dates printed blurred, but I always chose to pay for it anyway. The easy keyboard form of making, resizing and cropping to see it up on a wall someday at another person's house. How the months turned into one another with a spiral-bound resistance.
I remember you picking raspberries in the wild garden. The color of their blood on your hands, under your nails. It looked like they've waited for you and not for me. We ate them sitting on a wooden stool under the green fishing net. I remember the blackbird my son shot, who was trapped under the sky-high cherry tree, his first killing. He couldn't sleep that night.
I remember how I used to use the past tense to refer to things that were behind me, how the night tortures the moment, drawn out present. I did not expect you everywhere, least of all in memory. I remember standing in the refrigerator's glow, a handful of blueberries straight from the punnet, eating endlessly through its background hum.
I remember my first poem on a sharp winter afternoon in April. I wrote it in my bedroom, a cold room at the back of a farm, once a cowshed. The beams painted ultramarine by my mother, the poem had a classical form, 4x4, and every line started with the same words. Maybe the theme was spring, I can't remember. But the tingling I felt still is a sign of the appearance of the news.
I remember the word said too early, a kind of illumination. We still had a window there, which feathered the morning light on gravel. I remember him leaning in that corner somewhere against day's easing in and wall, how it was in that tone of day that he looked up and said it. When does the word become a poem, a nighttime, a life of the things you will say, accidentally or a premonition?
I remember the German poetess, whom I met at an international poetry festival in Medellin. She won a prestigious prize and bought a silver Mercedes with canary yellow leather seats, though she couldn't drive. I remember our own small Toyota in which we, our little boy in the back seat, drove to Spain. We sat on our towels and sleeping bags from lack of space. Sometimes we screamed because of the heat. We called it the silver bullet.
I remember the heaviness of morning, the exhale of electric blinds, the window straining against the too brightness and the orange book on the table now burning a hole through the wood. I remember turning out into the street, that same electric colour, a smashed candle on the floor, thrown from how high. That morning signs had gone up to explain the building opposite, as if each building needs its own explanation in a city of height and window. I remember spending the day my hand on and in brickwork, asking, how did you come to be here? The bricks refusing to answer.
I remember the little stone I found on the Cretan coast, black with white spots imprinted. I used it to meditate, 4 times a day for a quarter of an hour, looking at this small universe. My dad and his mother appeared next to me, as if coming out of the stone. not to persuade me to join them in heaven, but just to comfort me.
I remember the lost property basket, the looseness of other people's t-shirts, how the loss seemed saturated with someone else, the skin of them now close to mine. I remember strip lighting and the pendulous flooding of the floor, blue and green distinct against each other under netting or movement, how the foot's acceleration carried through the hall, a shriek accident of being young and running somewhere. I remember running and the matter of my body past the finish line.
I remember the standoff perfume I couldn't afford as a student. The first day it fell onto the bathroom floor, which I went to lie in naked. 20 years later I received so many bottles of Chanel as a gift for my birthday, I could poison myself. It made me sad, because I remember the division of body, not of body and soul.
I remember that the rose water she liked to wear came to hang off everything, her house, her son, the bag she packed when she was going elsewhere for a while. I remember someone with the same smell passing me in a refrigerator aisle of the supermarket. They say heads can snap up, but for that moment mine had never cracked itself into awareness so fast. I remember looking at someone else entirely, not her, thinking about how she was everywhere without even trying.
I remember a procession in the spring village with ribbons on the trees, dresses false white in the cutting sun. I remember the light in May, as if God himself was filming. I was just passing by, on my way to a bigger village, when I saw the little brides. Some of them wore rings.
I remember you with tulips outside Zuiderkerk, and yes, it is too much, but you are an ecstasy of blonde and aloft flowers. I remember the day we did the ashes, the benches of the Engelbewaarde, where you, Curly, now stand 2 hands on sunlit apple juice, the glass a condensed catastrophe in your hands. I remember light always when we are here.
I remember the Asia Blue Cafe, where I wasn't allowed to serve a writer more than 10 espressos, but he stopped counting himself. I remember the crackling night in which we made a song. I remember my laughs that surround me like a small planet. I remember me longing like a vine. Remember me. Thank you.